Is the Florida abortion law enforceable? Today on The Simple Truth, we consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong, chaste heart of Saint Joseph. I'm your host, Jim Havens, and our guest today is Pam Stenzel, founder of Enlighten Communications, enlightencom.com. Very blessed to have Pam back with us once again. We got back-to-back Mondays here with Pam. Pam, thanks for coming back. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. How are you today?
I am great. It's good to be back with you and talk a little bit about Florida today.
Yes, absolutely. So we didn't get a chance to dig into it last Monday, and thanks be to God we have a chance today. So first, can you share with us why should this topic on the enforcement of Florida's abortion law be of interest to everyone, regardless of what state they live in?
Yeah, I think because we've kind of entered into this post-Dobbs situation where every state's arguing about what restrictions they will have or they won't have. And we have some states that literally have zero restrictions on anything. And then you have other states like Texas who have enacted what we would call a fairly clean bill. In other words, there's not exceptions all over it, even though, again, the discussion of it being enforceable. So the reality is, no matter what state you're living in, if you're hearing about efforts of the pro-life community to change law or to prevent abortion or to lessen or restrict it, I think it's important that we all look at what strategy is working and what's not, and to be honest about it, because I think a lot of things that we've done, Jim, over the last many years in the pro-life movement has been passing things that make us feel good, but nobody asks any questions about whether they're actually doing what you intended that law to do, and that's prevent abortions from happening and protecting our preborn children. So I think every state should be looking very hard at laws that are being passed, laws that are being promoted, bills that are being brought to session. Session just started in this last week. I've been really busy in 13 different states right now. So I think all of us need to take a look at what other states are doing and the effects of the laws that they're passing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as we talked about it quite extensively last time, and we talk about it every Friday in the Friday with Father show. Look, we want to end all of this. This is crazy that we're even in this moment, that we have to talk about this over the past decades, over 50 years now of this legalized child murder in our nation. And again, by the way, loss of human life, we're talking about a 9/11 every day that is pretty much going ignored, certainly not being responded to with the magnitude that it deserves. And so we would call for the strategy of recognizing the personhood of every human being, including the child in the womb, from conception, fertilization. And you can't just be murdering human beings, persons, and persons have a constitutional right to equal protection under the laws, under the 14th Amendment. So we call for that to be federally applied. And certainly the battle goes on at the state level, regardless, as we try to continue to push for the end of this nationally and still on the state level. We are still looking for ultimately to end it at the state level. If we don't get to the end at the federal level right away, it's still looking to end it state by state. So looking to go personhood based on your state constitution and outlaw the thing completely. And certainly Florida can do that with personhood in the Florida Constitution. So we talked about that a lot last time, but now getting into more of the details of the state fight, if you working our way, I guess, towards that. If we don't have that done immediately, well, let's look at what's going on currently and still trying to push forward as hard as we possibly can here. And so we get to this state law in Florida, and I think it's representative to any sort of deep red state that has fairly strong pro-life laws in some way that need to be enforced. That's where we are in Florida, although I think the law in Florida ought to be way stronger based on Governor DeSantis and the political capital he has, as well as the super majority that he has. They could go all the way and end this thing. Certainly, they don't need to have all these exceptions they have, and their limit right now that they have in law is this 6-week limit. Now, what we're talking about today on this show is that even enforceable, and what's going on the ground currently? So Pam, let us know. You are there on the ground in Florida. I'm on the ground in Florida too. I've been talking to some folks that are outside the killing centers. I haven't been out there in a while actually myself, so I'm kind of relying on the reporting of others on this. But what are you seeing? What are you noticing on the ground in Florida?
Yeah, well, the first thing, because I've been able to be client services director for 5 clinics in Florida. So we're in Naples, Fort Myers, Sarasota, and our Sarasota clinic is literally in the parking lot of Planned Parenthood there. So we have a pretty good heartbeat on what's going on with them. And then we opened up in Gainesville. So we've been really paying close attention to what the women who are coming into our pregnancy center, either prior to going to an abortion clinic or Planned Parenthood or coming directly after, paying really attention to what kind of messaging has been given. And I think it was a unique year last year because the law, the Supreme Court could have allowed that law, the heartbeat law, to go into effect as early as September of 2023, and they chose to sit on it all the way until February of 2024, when they made their ruling about the 15-week ban and said the 15-week ban would be fine. Well, by the time they ruled that it was acceptable to put any restrictions at all on abortion access, the other side, as you know, the Amendment 4 and the push had already been going from the pro-abortion world to pass Amendment 4, which would negate every pro-life law ever made in the state of Florida, including parental notification and 24-hour waiting period and all of it. So the timing of it was really crucial because it put the abortion industry in a really bad spot. They had to publicly state that there was almost no access to abortion in the state of Florida because of the law that was going to be taking effect May 1st, right? In order to get support for Amendment 4. But at the same time, they wanted still to be able to do the abortions they were doing. And so it was a catch-22 for them. And you could tell in their messaging that they were struggling because they wanted to say women now have lost all access to abortion in Florida, when you and I both know, Jim, that wasn't the case. But they had to communicate that to get people on board for the amendment vote. And after November happened, when that amendment was defeated, it was very interesting to listen to the re-messaging about abortion is still available. You can still get an abortion. Don't believe that it's not available. And we started to see that uptick again in women getting abortions. And so the unenforceability of it, when you have a ban that's based on weeks, it's always going to depend on how they're dating the pregnancy. And in Florida, they should be dating it with an ultrasound. It should not be dated by a stated LMP. Anyone can tell you that a woman just giving you her last menstrual period date has nothing to do with the gestational age of the baby. And the only way to really figure out how the gestational age of that infant or the baby is to do an ultrasound. Well, ultrasounds then relate to the sonographer. So if the ultrasound is being done in the abortion clinic, how do we know whether they're dating doing the proper sonography? It's the same with the detectable heartbeat situation. And some of you will remember back in Atlanta when the crazy woman that was running for governor, Stacey Abrams, made a comment that we were faking the sonogram, we were faking the heartbeat, that it didn't really exist, and there's no heartbeat of a fetus up until, she said something crazy like 16 weeks or some ridiculous thing. And so they tried to claim that we were all faking this heartbeat, which is absurd. So the reality is, and my sonographers will tell you, you can roll your, the machine over the probe and just miss everything you want to miss. And then just say, didn't see it. It's not there. Didn't hear it. Couldn't get a heartbeat. Couldn't find the baby. Couldn't measure the sac. And we know that even before the law, we had women especially women who had undergone abortion pill reversal, who had gone to Planned Parenthood. They had taken the first pill and then regretted it and called the hotline, and we were able to get progesterone on board and possibly save the life of their baby. Well, they were told at the abortion clinic that they were 6.4 weeks along. And then literally 24 hours later, we performed the same ultrasound on the same woman, and she's 8.9 weeks along. And so clearly they were not doing their due diligence with the ultrasound. So that's a huge issue when the abortion provider is the one who is dating the pregnancy, whether it's through LMP, or which is terrible, or even a bad ultrasound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let me make sure I understand this correctly. So currently under Florida law, abortion is prohibited after 6 weeks gestation. There are exceptions, these ridiculous exceptions in Florida law that we can get into. But the point here is that they're calculating this gestational age from the first day of a woman's LMP, last menstrual period. So I know we got the music here with the heartbreak, so I'll ask her when we come back. But what I want to ask here is, number one, am I hearing this correctly? That right now, this is basically the way this law is being enforced, is simple reporting. That basically the abortion center, the killing center, is just asking the woman to just tell them what is the date of your last menstrual period, and then they're going by that. So if she lies about that, then that's fine, or or they can write down whatever they want. So look, this is obviously a terrible way to enforce it. We'll get into it when we get back. Stay tuned.
iCatholic Mobile is a proud sponsor of the Station of the Cross. Solid connections, reliable data. That's iCatholic Mobile, a 5G wireless provider dedicated to your faith and values. Enjoy unlimited talk and text, dependable coverage nationwide. And every plan has unlimited data and free roaming in Canada and Mexico. iCatholic Mobile, the service that connects you to what matters most. More info at iCatholicMobile.com.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with Pam Stenzel. We are talking about the enforceability of Florida's abortion law. If you want to give a call, especially if you are someone that is on the ground, a pro-lifer on the ground outside of the abortion killing centers in Florida, and you want to call in and let us know what you're seeing, what you're reporting. We are hearing that numbers have not gone down in terms of traffic that people are seeing on the ground. In fact, I was talking with someone outside that spends a lot of time outside the Fort Myers Planned Parenthood Murder Center, and they told me just yesterday that not only does it seem like traffic hasn't gone down, but it even seems to have ticked up, which is quite bizarre when the law is much more limited to what is allowed. So is it being enforced is the question. It seems like it isn't. And so what is the mechanism from the state to enforce this law? That's what we're getting into here. And so that's where we left off. But if you do want to give us a call, 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. So where we left off. So Pam, I guess this is how I'm hearing it, that it sounds like the way the state has left the enforcement of this law, this 6-week Heartbeat Act, now law in effect since May 1st, 2024, a lot of time to figure out some enforcement here. The way that they have it being enforced right now is based on the pregnant mom going into the abortion center, being honest about stating when the day of her last menstrual period was. And I guess this is calculated from the first day of a woman's LMP, last menstrual period. So having that date accurate, stating it truthfully, and then the folks in the killing center office receiving that accurately and truthfully and saying whether this is beyond the line of what is allowed by Florida law or not, which, again, if I'm correct on this, so the way this would work would be last menstrual period, the time that you would take a pregnancy test that would say that you would be pregnant, that would be about 4 weeks after what would be about the last menstrual period, maybe the first day of the LMP. So about 4 weeks. And then you'd have about 2 weeks, I guess, under Florida law to get into one of these killing centers if you wanted to go ahead and make use of this terrible child murder law and have your baby killed in one of these killing centers. So not a lot of time to make that happen. It would be odd that the numbers would still be very high with that being the narrow window. But am I correct in understanding that this is how the state has lined it up to be enforced? It's based upon what the pregnant mom is saying. It's based upon what the actual folks inside the killing center that we're hoping that they're going to be honest and truthful about all of this, and that's what we're relying on. Is that correct?
Well, I think, Jim, probably bigger than that. In Florida, there's some laws that are still in effect, and they were in effect before the 6-week ban, and they are still in effect. One is that abortion must be procured in front of a doctor. You must see a doctor, okay? You can't get them by mail. You can't do telehealth. You have to be in the presence of a doctor. You have to have an ultrasound. Okay, I do not believe that they have ever dated by a stated LMP. They must have an ultrasound. And the ultrasound is the only thing that can give you accurate gestational age. An LMP means nothing. And it's not even about, Jim, it's not even about them writing something wrong. These women have no idea what their LMP is. If you ask any of us, ask your favorite 20-year-old what their LMP is, and they'll be like, I don't know, it was January. They have zero idea. Many of these women, because of some of the contraception, hormonal contraception they're taking, are not even having regular menstruation. So there's zero way to, LMP is ridiculous. So we have in Florida that you have to procure an abortion from a physician. There needs to be a doctor on site. You have to have an ultrasound, and there still is a 24-hour waiting period, which means in Florida, you can't get the abortion the day you have your ultrasound. It has to be scheduled at least 24 hours after. So these women still should be showing up at the abortion clinic at least twice before actually getting either the pill, abortion pills, or a surgical abortion. And so my feeling is that what's happening at the abortion clinic itself is that they are purposefully misdating by not performing a good ultrasound. And you know, and that's why we still say to these girls, get an ultrasound from someone who's not making money off of your decision, which would be the pregnancy center next door. Go there and have your ultrasound.
So then wouldn't it be an easy way to enforce this by saying, look, if they already have to, it's mandated by law, they have to have an ultrasound at this Planned Parenthood. I guess, first of all, the question, let me just finish my thought there. I guess, so wouldn't it be easy to enforce it by just saying that there'd have to be some third party, governmental party? I suppose it could be some sort of a private contractor even that would, I guess the government could trust, but somebody else who's checking that ultrasound and making sure that it is what they say it is. But I guess the problem then comes in where, they can make it appear in the office, the one doing the ultrasound can make it appear like they can't find anything, which would mean that even if the child is 6 weeks and beyond, they can make the ultrasound look like it isn't. So even if you sent that ultrasound picture out to somebody, it wouldn't do any good because it's still a lie, right? So I guess there'd have to be, again, we're trying to figure out what would be the right way to enforce this. I guess there's no way around it with the ultrasound, checking it with a third party unless you see something else. But also, when you would use an ultrasound, if everything was being done correctly by the tech, at what point, I guess, does the child start showing up on the ultrasound? You can see that child clearly at 6 weeks, so that wouldn't be an issue. It's just an issue of whether or not that tech is properly doing the ultrasound. Is that right?
Correct. I mean, with a vaginal probe, which is the best way to do an ultrasound during first trimester, is the vaginal probe. We've been able to get heartbeat detection as young as under 6 weeks at 5 point whatever with vaginal probe. So the reality is they should see at least a gestational sac. They should be able to see, and certainly they should be able to get a heartbeat by the 6th week gestation. So. They could go in and do periodic chart checks. They could require that they randomly check charts out of all these abortion clinics, and because it'll be pretty crazy if it's constantly they never even see a gestational sac. And I'm not so sure they would be performing a surgical abortion when there's no gestational sac. So, we go back to the pill abortion alternative, as it were. So I'm not sure. The other little exception to their little rule or the law that bothers me is that there's a rape, incest, or trafficking exception, but there is no requirement of an actual police report. So all that has to go into the patient's chart is that the sex that caused her to become pregnant was non-consensual, that she did not consent to the sex. And then that statement notarized, placed in her patient chart, is enough for them to do an abortion, even if they've detected the baby up to 15 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's interesting too. So if you would see the rape and incest numbers go way up, then that would be clear that there's something very wrong there, that all of a sudden the numbers there are going up. It would be clear that they're exploiting this loophole. So that'll be interesting to look for. Now, again, we don't have, at least I haven't been able to find it, the monthly account of the reasons for abortion broken down by month since that May 1st enforcement went into place. So I can't see rape and incest numbers per month to know, I guess, if that loophole's being exploited. The government agency in charge of this would have those numbers. To my knowledge, they've not reported or they've not released those monthly reports yet, but that will be interesting if they do, and to be able to see that. But I guess in terms of trying to get to an acceptable enforcement, and again, this is what bothers me very much about this, and is even surprising to a degree, even though I shouldn't be too surprised anymore about things like this. But I would think there'd be somebody in the Florida state government, maybe Ron DeSantis himself, maybe somebody on his staff, maybe somebody in one of his agencies who would be on top of this and would say, we have to now find a way to effectively enforce this law. It's been in effect since May 1st, 2024, and nobody's been thinking about this question. That boggles my mind that there's nobody on top of this, because just kicking this around, wouldn't this be maybe an effective way to do it? To say, hey, you know what? Since it's mandatory ultrasound already, that's already in the state law, let's just make a law that says for that mandatory ultrasound, you can't go to the killing center for that ultrasound. You have to wait a day anyway. So go to CPCI, go to community pregnancy clinics. That's where, go to the pro-life medical resource centers, medical clinics. You know they're going to give them a good ultrasound, and they're going to be looking to find life, and you can't fake that. So go there. That's the way to enforce it. They're going to give you an accurate ultrasound, and they're going to let you know if it's beyond 6 weeks, if this child is beyond 6 weeks or not. That would be a great way, an easy way to enforce it, a simple law of that nature. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Pam?
Yeah, I think as long as our pregnancy centers don't feel that they're aiding and abetting the abortion clinic by doing that, I mean, that's the hardest thing. You know, we want them first so that we can give them that accurate ultrasound and let them hear the heartbeat of their baby and let them see their baby on that screen. It's because in the abortion clinic, they're not going to show them. They're not, the mother will not even see what the tech is seeing. And that's the other thing. It's everything is done not right there, and we're going to let her see it, and we're going to let her see it on a big screen right in front of her, and be able to see that little baby moving around. It's pretty amazing, actually. I've gotten to sit on many of those ultrasounds. So I think the other thing, and I'm glad that you asked if there's anyone out there who's on the sidewalk, wherever, we need to hear from you. I've instructed all of my nurses, you have to be detectives. You have to ask questions. We aren't going to find out if the women themselves who've been through it aren't telling us what's going on inside of that clinic. We can send in plants. That's a little hard to do if you're not actually pregnant. So... but I've done it back when I was younger, Jim. I went into all 5 abortion clinics in the Minneapolis area, wired to get their counseling on tape. So, I mean, there's ways to do that, but we've got to play detective here. We can't just trust that they're doing the right thing, because we know they most likely are not.
Yeah, give us a call if you're on the ground in Florida especially, but anybody else who wants to call in a question or comment on this, 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. Hey, look, it's an extra benefit of such a law to say, hey, you have to go to a pro-life pregnancy medical center because we know we can trust them to do the ultrasound accurately. And, oh, by the way, while you're there, they can give all the information that is being withheld from you from these killing centers, all the help that is available in the community to help these moms, to help these families that they're not being told about. And how can anybody really argue with that? That's something that could be put into that same law. These women have the right to have all the information. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with Pam Stenzel. We are talking about Florida's abortion law. Is it enforceable? What needs to be done to make it so? Is there anything? All right, so we're coming up with some ideas here as we discuss it, but certainly there's a need because the numbers do not add up. If you have any comment or question on this, especially if you're a pro-lifer on the ground outside of the killing centers in Florida, give us a call. Let us know what you're seeing out there. 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. And so, the numbers don't add up. We talked about this a few weeks ago. I think we talked about it a little bit last Monday as well, Pam. But in 2023, 84,052 abortions were reported, and this number was released by the Florida Agency for Health Care Administration, their annual report for 2024, 60,755. And that's without the December numbers fully coming in, as well as there are also problems with this reporting. There's a lot that I don't understand about it. For instance, it says that the Florida state law doesn't require reporting outside of the formal health system. So I guess that means any killing centers outside of the formal health system in Florida are not required to report by law. And I'm not sure exactly what that distinction is and what killing centers are outside of the formal Florida health system and how many children they're murdering every year. But anyway, from that Florida agency, the Agency for Healthcare Administration still saying 61,000 plus for last year, which is a decrease from the year before, but not significant enough to reflect the May 1st Heartbeat Act going into law. So these numbers are not adding up. It seems very clear that this law is not being enforced currently, and it should be no surprise because as we talk about what the enforcement mechanism is, it's basically non-existent, left up to the abortionists themselves. So anything else that you want to add regarding the numbers or anything else, Pam? Go ahead.
Yeah, Jim, I think the other number to look at that is very fascinating to me is that of those 84,000 abortions that were done in 2023, only 33,453 were before 6 weeks. But in 2024, and we don't have all the numbers yet, reminding that we won't get an update till next month at the earliest. And many years past, they've gone even into March and then updated all of the other months as well. So we could see a big jump. But in 2024, a full, and not again through November, 55,292 were done before 6 weeks. So this massive jump, almost doubling from 2023 before 6 weeks to 2024 before 6 weeks. And so I would say if that's not an indication of bad dating going on, and the fact that these ultrasounds are not being performed properly and that they're not reporting gestational age properly, there is no way you would have that kind of a jump in 1 year.
Yeah. So where are the pro-life leaders in Florida going raising heck about this to the governor, to the state? I mean, this is the part that really bothers me the most. The fact that, that we can kind of stumble into all this and see all of this and say, well, isn't there someone that it's actually like their job to be on top of this and to be noticing this and to be sounding the alarm on this? It shouldn't have to fall to us, stumbling into it. But here we are. And so I guess I start to think about, okay, well, who is supposed to be in charge of this on the state level? I think it's also a good question to ask who's supposed to be in charge of this on the pro-life movement level, I guess, within the state. What groups do we have where we have full-time pro-life leaders that are supposed to be on top of laws and enforcing laws, and why aren't they talking about this, and why aren't they going very strong on why aren't they raising awareness on this where we're hearing this from them instead of having to figure this out? I think that's an important question. What are they doing? And then also on the state level, what is the appropriate agency within the state that is responsible for this enforcement? I don't think it's the Agency for Healthcare Administration that releases these numbers. They just seem to be part of the reporting of these numbers. It seems to me, as I dig into it, obviously, ultimately, this stops at the governor's desk, but down the chain of command, I would say the Attorney General's office. And so that's where I went, because again, you could start to say, well, what about the local sheriff's office? Yeah, maybe, but I don't think they want to be involved in this, right? And so there's no mechanism where they're being empowered to be involved in this. It's kind of a messy thing to try to get them involved in this. I think we got to get the Attorney General's office involved in this. So I did make a call over there today. Now they're in a transition with their leadership. Ashley Moody, the Attorney General, she's being put into the Senate seat, vacated by Marco Rubio, taking the Secretary of State position in the Trump cabinet. And so the new incoming Attorney General seems to be Governor DeSantis' former chief of staff, James Uthmeyer, and so he's not in the position yet. I called over there, though, called the office. I said, hey, do you know when he's going to take the helm? They said, oh, we don't know. We can't tell you anything about that. You just have to keep watching the website. And I said, okay, well, who's in charge of this mechanism of enforcement of this state law on abortion? I have no idea. Well, who can I talk to who can tell me who's the person in charge of this? Which is the person you can give me who would be appropriate to answer questions about this? The person said they had no idea, and there's no one that they can refer me to who would know. I've got to go onto the website and fill out a form, and he's sure they'll get back to me very quickly. Well, I filled out the form. We'll see how quickly they get back to me. But I think this has to bubble up through the Attorney General to Governor DeSantis. Governor DeSantis should be answering these questions. There should be reporters asking him these questions, and he should have to answer. I would think, being alerted to this question, I would hope that he'd want to solve this problem. But I guess I really have no idea. It doesn't seem to be a priority for anybody in his administration at this point. Pam, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think enforcement at the government level of these abortion clinics is going to have to come in the form of pulling licenses, pulling doctors' licenses, shutting the clinics down, closing them up as they did with the clinic out in near Pensacola about a year ago. And, that's, or heavy fines. I think that's the only thing that we've seen work is fining them and pulling doctors' licenses, medical licenses, and shutting these clinics down. I mean, that I don't know how, but they've got to decide to do it. They've got to decide to provide the oversight in order to provide proof that they are breaking laws. And I would say from the beginning of your statement, Jim, and I think people would understand this, is that the pro-life community, and I saw it happen here in Florida. I don't know, we call them the mainstream pro-life community or whatever label you want to give them. They just want, it goes back to, they just want to feel good. They want to rah-rah and cheer. Look we passed this law. Yay for us. Florida's a pro-life state. Look at what we did. They have zero care about whether the law they passed is actually enforceable and being enforced on the ground. Did it actually change anything? They don't want to get into the weeds there. They just want to talk about laws that they passed. And it's the same when it was parental notification or the 24-hour waiting period. It's just like, well, we passed this law, but what's being done to make sure that law is being followed?
Right. Yeah. And that's deeply disturbing that that's the case. Again, it comes back to this question. Any thoughts, I guess, on why that is the case or what can be done about it is maybe the more important question on the pro-life level. On the government level, it's okay. We've got to start digging into the folks in charge here, making them aware and holding their feet to the fire. So we got to start figuring that out. In terms of the pro-life leadership, though, what can be done? Is there anything that can be done to make things like this a higher priority on their radar? Is there anything that can be done to shift them away from the pep rally and towards the work that has to be done here, especially if they're taking money in an organization where this is part of their job description and they're not doing it? And again, I have nobody in particular in mind here in Florida. I'm not really sure what the pro-life landscape is in terms of leadership. I think of maybe Right to Life groups. They normally are pretty well funded and pretty big. I'm sure we've got a Florida Right to Life group. What are they doing? Why are they not on top of this? But yeah, I'd have to learn more about who's actually in these positions. Not in Florida, nonprofit, pro-life nonprofits who are well funded and not doing anything here. I think it would be good to be aware of that. But Pam, any thoughts on what can be done to maybe motivate them or change their hearts and minds, or maybe, I don't know, any thoughts at all of what we can do to, I guess, bolster the pro-life leadership in this area?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have to keep speaking. We can't be silent. And sadly, the people who are speaking are people who are on the ground working with women. It's the people who are out in front of these killing centers. It's the people in our pregnancy centers who are seeing these women and the damage that abortion is doing to the women, and of course, the death of their children. And so until we begin to speak out about what's really happening, I mean, I said it earlier, I hated to be, the whole year after they passed this bill that I fought in the Senate because of all these exceptions and because it was unenforceable at the time they passed it, I was like the lone voice crying in the wilderness, while the rest of the pro-life community, Florida Right to Life, some of the other big organizations that claim to be pro-life, were sitting there going, just Pam, that's better than nothing. It's a step in the right direction, and you just have to, be okay with it. And I said, I'm going to make you a promise. We're going to see the same number of abortions, or clearly very close, after this passes than we did before. It's going to change nothing on the ground. Well, the only people that know what's happening on the ground are the people who are on the ground, Jim. And that's the problem. The vast majority of Floridians who call themselves pro-life are not on the front lines. They don't see what we see every day. And unless we continue to be the voice for the voiceless, and that's what we're doing, we're giving a voice to all those preborn children that are being murdered down the street, while all of our people in our pews and our at Mass and in our churches are sitting there going, I don't want to know. Don't give me the details. I felt good about myself because I voted pro-life. So stop making me look at the reality of what's going on down the street in my neighborhood.
Yeah, and that is true. I mean, a good example of it is when Governor DeSantis signed the 15-week abortion limit into law. He had a massive pep rally. He called in 40 days for life, and they stocked it with all kinds of people, a lot of young, a lot of women. They made it look real good. A lot of cheering and all of that. And I know some of the folks that were there, and I don't blame anybody, but I do think, what a show. What a show when he's got a super majority that they could pass a much stricter law. And then what does he do in contrast to that when he signs the 6-week limit? No pep rally, no big show of it. It's in the cover of darkness in the middle of the night. Basically, he passes that thing and that becomes law. So I think that's a pretty clear evidence that there's definitely truth to what you're saying. There's something very wrong here. And nobody wants to criticize pro-lifers who you certainly want to hope are very well intended. I assume they are. But how else are we going to change things unless we hold up the problem and say, look, this is a problem. We have to change it. So I think that's where we are here in what we're talking about today, and we'll get into it in the final segment. Again, we would love to hear from you if you want to call in, especially if you're on the ground in Florida or a Florida resident who has questions, or anywhere that just has a question or a comment on this topic. Be great to hear from you. 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. One last segment to go, and I think part of this again is, we talked about it last Monday, the fact that this is so difficult to enforce. It just goes back to the fact that, well, we've got to just completely end this. Let's stop trying to enforce a sort of unenforceable law here and understand we're dealing with child murder. It ought to be outlawed across the board without exception. Governor DeSantis could sign a personhood executive order, trigger the Florida Supreme Court, and make it happen. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with Pam Stenzel, our guest today. She is founder of Enlightened Communications, enlightencom.com, a pro-life warrior, and just a nonstop worker in helping those that are being affected by this madness of this ongoing daily mass murder of abortion. And so, Pam, final segment here. I first just want to give you the floor. Anything else you want to say, anything else you want to add today, go for it.
Jim, listen, I think all of your viewers need to hear the words of Governor DeSantis just last Friday. This is verbatim what he said at the March for Life. Here is what you should be asking your elected officials to do on the issue of the sanctity of life. Show courage in defense of the unborn. That's what we need from the people that we elect to the office. The sanctity of life does not depend on poll results. It doesn't depend on which way the wind is blowing. It's an enduring truth, and it represents the foundation of our society, which in our original founding document, which we will celebrate next year at the Declaration of Independence, declared that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, beginning with the right to life itself. Those were the words he spoke to all of those pro-life people gathered at the March for Life in D.C. And I'm like, Governor DeSantis, I am your constituent, and I am going to hold you accountable to take some courage here and end this. Stop with this silliness, all these laws, and accept, and these children deserve to live and these children deserve to die. We're done with it. They were endowed by the Creator with the right to life, and that's where we get our rights, not from government, not from governors, not from Supreme Courts. It comes from God himself.
Yes. Yeah. Very well said. I agree completely. And yeah, maybe it is a time where, look, when's the last time you wrote an elected official a letter, a handwritten letter or a typed letter with your signature and called them on in some way? Maybe never. Maybe it's been a long time. Maybe you do it frequently. I don't know. But I think it's important for us to do that now for Governor DeSantis's sake, and to bring these things to his attention, and the contradiction of what he's saying versus how he is acting. Call him on to sign an executive order on personhood. Call him on to at least enforce the law that is already on the books, the law that he signed. At least have a mechanism, a true effective mechanism for enforcement, which in just half an hour of kicking this around here, coming up with the idea, I think is a decent one. It could be built upon maybe, but to say let's have maybe at the very least have a third party, have maybe a Florida health system hospital or healthcare provider who does ultrasounds. Make them be the one that does the ultrasound. Take it out of the hands of the abortionist. Take the ultrasound out of the hands of the abortionist in terms of determining the age of the child. And I think the best would be put it into the hands of the pro-life ultrasound techs at the pro-life medical centers, and allow them to do it, and to give them the full information, not just seeing the ultrasound, but also understanding the resources that are available to help them to have their heart turned in love towards their child in the true difficulties that they face. All the help and resources that are available in the community, a pro-life medical center can help them get connected in all of those ways and give them all that information. So anyway, maybe it's time, put it in your own words, but write Governor DeSantis a letter on that, especially if you're a Florida resident. I think it's really our responsibility. We do have a caller on the line. Let's bring the caller in. Not sure, actually. Oh, it looks like it is Bob in Fort Myers, Florida. Bob, thanks for calling in. What would you like to share with us today?
Hey, Jim. Thanks for having me. I'd just like to, I'm just responding to your request to be here at 4:30. I'm sorry I'm a little late, but I do want to get the word out. What you saw yesterday, I went through a request. Based on our work as Sidewalk Advocates for Life at Fort Myers, we've seen a level of volume on Tuesday and Thursday abortion days that we didn't think was compatible with the current law in terms of the limits. I did a request to the Agency for Healthcare Administration for Florida, and I was turned down from a complaint perspective as something they would inspect. But they did give me access to their site, and through that access, I was able to find a July 8th survey inspection that was done at Fort Myers Planned Parenthood, where there were 12, there were deficiencies cited. They've not been corrected since then, where 12 patients had abortions after 15 weeks. We don't know. There was no medical exception documentation for all 12 of them. We don't know exactly when those abortions occurred because they redacted the dates of each patient record. And I think this is grave concern from my perspective in terms of enforcing the law. We can win hearts and minds, but we also need to enforce the law.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for calling in, Paul. I appreciate that. And yeah, I've been trying to make sense of what I'm looking at when I read what you have here with these complaints. I guess I'm not 100% clear on exactly where these complaints come from and how they're reported without any sort of, consequence, right? This is a serious violation if this is the case, right? These complaints, which lead to the knowledge that these were children that were killed in violation of the 6-week law, by all indications here. So then, who is the appropriate party to bring the consequence to this, the punishment to this? That we can't be having the law be broken by this abortion killing center as they're doing here. It's probably not as this agency says, in Florida, this is the reporting agency. So they're saying, that's not their job. But who is it? Is it the local sheriff's office? Who needs to have this information and to act on it? Any thought on it, Bob?
Well, I guess my first thought would be to go to higher levels of the state government to which this agency for healthcare administration reports. It's got to report up to one of the major department heads, whoever does health and human services or whatever that is in the state of Florida. And to me, you can't leave deficiency cited that includes a failure to document, as per the law, these late abortions later than the limits in the law. You can't let that go for 7 months now. And in addition to that, the only other inspections they've done at that site since then was one standard inspection and 3 that where the deficiencies were resolved through September. So since September 20th, they've not done any inspections at Planned Parenthood Fort Myers. So that's 5 months, 4.5 months, even though there's still outstanding violations cited.
Yeah. Thank you for calling in, Bob. Thank you for your great work. Pam, less than a minute to go. Final thoughts from you today.
It just shows you how hard it is to enforce, even when people like Bob are trying so hard to hold them accountable. It's just very difficult.
Right. Yeah, which goes back to the fact that what are we doing here, right? Trying to get a law enforced on murdering babies up to a certain point that aren't, that don't fall into various exceptions. All this is nonsense, right? Let's stop killing children. Let's stop murdering innocent babies. What are we doing? Governor DeSantis, please sign an executive order on personhood. Let's end this. God bless you all.